जय जमुना तीरवनचारी जय कुंज विहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे राम राम ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Reading from Canto 2, Chapter 9, text 18 to 32. We'll read the translation English only
Lord Brahma, thus seeing the personality of Godhead in his fullness, was overwhelmed with joy within his heart, and thus in full transcendental love and ecstasy, his eyes filled with tears of love. He thus bowed down before the Lord. That is the way of the highest perfection for the living being, Paramahamsa.
And seeing Brahma present before him, the Lord accepted him as worthy to create living beings, to be controlled as he desired. And thus, being much satisfied with him, the Lord shook hands with Brahma and, slightly smiling, addressed him thus.
The beautiful personality of Godhead addressed Lord Brahma. O Brahma, impregnated with the Vedas, I am very much pleased with your long accumulated penance, with the desire for creation. Hardly am I pleased with the pseudo-mystics.
I wish you good luck. O Brahma, you might ask from me, the giver of all benediction, all that you might desire. You might know that the ultimate benediction, as the result of all penances, is to see me by realization.
The highest perfectional ingenuity is the personal perception of my abodes, and this has been possible because of your submissive attitude in the performance of severe penance according to my order.
O sinless Brahma, you may know from me that it was I who first ordered you to undergo penance when you were perplexed in your duty. Such penance is my heart and soul, and therefore penance and I are non-different.
I create this cosmos by such penance, I maintain it by the same energy, and I withdraw all by the same energy. Therefore, the potency is penance only.
Lord Brahma said, O personality of Godhead, you are situated in every living entity's heart as the supreme director, and therefore you are aware of all endeavors by your superior intelligence without any hindrance whatsoever.
In spite, in spite of that, my Lord, I am praying to you to kindly fulfill my desire. May I please be informed how, in spite of your transcendental form, you assume the mundane form, although you have no such form at all.
And please inform me how you, by your own self, manifest different energies for annihilation, generation, acceptance, and maintenance by combination and permutation.
O master of all energies, please tell me philosophically all about them. You play like a spider that covers itself by its own energy, and your determination is infallible.
Please tell me so that I may be taught in the matter by the instruction of the personality of Godhead, and may thus act instrumentally to generate living entities without being conditioned by such activities.
O my Lord, the unborn, you have shaken hands with me just as a friend does with a friend, as if equal in position. I shall be engaged in the creation of different types of living entities, and I shall be occupied in your service. I shall have no perturbation, but I pray that all this may not give rise to pride, as if I were the supreme.
Personality of Godhead said, knowledge about me, as described in the scriptures, is very confidential, and it has to be realized in conjunction with devotional service. The necessary paraphernalia for that process is being explained by me. You may take it up carefully.
Me, namely, my actual eternal form and my transcendental existence, color, qualities, and activities, let all be awakened within you by factual realization out of my causeless mercy.
So we can go to text 19, I believe, right? Tam priyamanam samupastitam kavim Raja visarge nija sasanadhanam Babhas ishat smita sochi sagira Ya priyam pritamana karis san
तं प्रीयमाणं समुपस्थितं कविं प्रजावसर्गे निजशासनाधनम् आस ईषत् स्मितशोचिसर्गिरा प्रिया प्रियं प्रीतमनाकल्पसन् Tum unto Lord Brahma, Priyamanam, worthy of being dear, Samapastitam, present before Kavi, the great scholar, Praja, the living entities, Visarge, in the matter of creation, Nija, his own, Sasana, controlled, Arhana, just suitable, Pase, addressed, Shut, mild, Smita, smiling, Sochisa, with enlightening, Pira, words, Priya, the beloved, Priyam, the counterpart of love, Pritamana, being very much pleased, Kare, by the hand, Spasan, shaking. Translation, Srila Prabhupada. And seeing Brahma present before him, the Lord accepted him as worthy to create living beings, to be controlled as he desired, and thus being much satisfied with him. The Lord shook hands with Brahma and, slightly smiling, addressed him thus. Would anyone like to volunteer to read the purports?
The creation of the material world is not blind or accidental. The living entities who are ever conditioned or nityabaddha are thus given a chance for liberation under the guidance of his own representative like Brahma. The Lord instructs Brahma in Vedic knowledge in order to diffuse this knowledge to the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls are forgetful souls in their relationship with the Lord, and thus a period of creation and the process of dissemination of Vedic knowledge are necessary activities of the Lord. Lord Brahma has a great responsibility in delivering the conditioned souls, and therefore he is very dear to the Lord. Brahma also does his duty very perfectly, not only by generating the living entities, but by also spreading his party for reclaiming the fallen souls. The party is called the Brahma Sampradaya, and any member of this party to date is naturally engaged in reclaiming the fallen souls back to Godhead, back home. The Lord is very much anxious to get back his parts and parcels, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita. No one is more dear than the one who takes the task of reclaiming the fallen souls back to Godhead. There are many renegades from the Brahma Sampradaya whose only business is to make men more forgetful of the Lord and thus entangle them more and more in material existence. Such persons are never dear to the Lord, and the Lord sends them deeper into the darkest region of the matter, so that such envious demons may not be able to know the Supreme Lord. Anyone, however, preaching the mission of the Lord in the line of the Brahma Sampradaya is always dear to the Lord, and the Lord, being satisfied with such a preacher of the authorized bhakti cult, shakes hands with him in great satisfaction.
Translation: And seeing Brahma present before him, the Lord accepted him as worthy to create beings, to be controlled as he desired, and thus being very much satisfied with him, the Lord shook hands with Brahma and slightly smiling addressed him thus. Om Jnana Tirandhasya Gnana Jnastakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave So here in this part of the Bhagavatam, so much has happened up until this point, but in some ways we're just getting started. The first canto, Sukadeva Goswami actually hadn't even spoken one word. I was just looking yesterday, and he just started speaking this canto. And the preliminary topics are being discussed of creation, planetary systems, living entities, material world, material nature. These basic ideas are being presented in the second canto. But in the story of Brahma, there's actually quite a few important lessons. Actually, this chapter that we're on, in some ways, could be considered the most important chapter in the Bhagavatam. Does anyone know why? So this chapter actually, after there's a few more verses after the last one here. The Lord, he speaks the four seed verses. These are like it's in Sanskrit, it's the Chatur Sloki. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there's also 4 seed verses. In the Bhagavatam, there's also 4 seed verses. And the significance of seed verses is that in Vedic wisdom, knowledge is not separated. Knowledge is connected. And it's not like you have disagreements, right? You don't have like a certain body of knowledge that conflicts with another body of knowledge. It's all consistent, it's coherent. And it builds upon one another, and it's actually pointing to one absolute truth. So, we have these seed verses in the Gita, Bhagavata, and just these four small verses, like in the Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Mattah Sarvam Pravartate, and then there's four verses like that. Krishna says, I'm the source of everything. And in the Bhagavatam, Krishna says the same thing. I'm the source of everything. And then, but the Bhagavad Gita is actually 700 verses. The Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses. And all the Vedic literature is hundreds of thousands of verses, if you include the Puranas and the Upanishads, all the different parts of the Vedas. But it's very significant that the entire body of knowledge is actually coming from these seed verses. And a lot of it has to do with the way knowledge is defined in Vedic literature. So in the West, secular science, knowledge is defined as data, as information. Knowledge in Vedic civilization is defined more defined as awareness, where it is like peeling the layers of an onion, right? Just kind of peel, and then when you peel all the layers, what you have left is truth, is the absolute truth. So it also, the reason why knowledge being a seed is also significant is that you have to water the seed, right? You have to cultivate it. It doesn't just automatically fructify. It's not that in the West or in secular science, it is just as much data as just and regurgitate is the barometer of knowledge. But there's no real, other than just repeating the same activity, which is memorization and repeating, there's really no cultivation, right? There's no cultivation of character. There's no cultivation of realization, of depth of wisdom, right? Wisdom is not really the equation there. That cultivation of that knowledge is actually is actually more important in some ways than the knowledge itself, because it is the process, it is the experience of receiving that knowledge. I was just thinking yesterday why can't we just read a book and learn the Bhagavatam and hear from the teacher, just who kind of reads it and explains it. And, just like we do in school, like if you go to university or college, that's the way we generally learn, is we don't really have much of a relationship with the teacher. At least nowadays we don't. And you pretty much, most kids I talk to, they say, I can learn everything just by reading the textbook. I don't need to go to class. Or you can just watch YouTube or whatever. But in spiritual lines, it can't be done that way. There has to be a relationship. And the reason why, it's a bond. It's not just a dissemination of information, there's a bond there. Just like if you have kids, your son and your daughter, you're not just giving them information. There's a deep bond with your children. So in the same way, this disciplic succession, this knowledge is being passed down from generation to generation. Not just disseminating information, but through this deep bond, this relationship that the guru and the disciple has. And it's in the spirit of appreciation, of gratitude. I was also thinking yesterday how the teacher, he is glorified. Like if you read the Bhagavatam, I mean, 50% of the Bhagavatam is glorification. Have you experienced that? Yeah, and also just verses, like whole chapters, like literally the whole chapter, right? Chapters of devotees glorifying the Lord, glorifying each other, glorifying other devotees, the spiritual master. I was just reading in the beginning of the second chapter, Sukata Goswami and Sutta Goswami, and also Parikshit Maharaj. Before they ask a question, usually we have like 20, 30 verses of glorifying the other person. So that's a very different spirit than what we hear in school. And then the person who's receiving, like Parikshit Maharaj, or in the case of Brahma, Krishna Brahma, or in the case of Narada and Brahma, Narada, or in the case of Sutta and Sonaka Rishi, or in the case of Sukata Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, whoever is inquiring, how are they being grateful? How are they appreciating? I was just meditating how, just look at Parikshit Maharaj, the chapter just previous to this. He literally asks 30 questions. 30. Tell me about this, the planetary systems, material creation, the living entities, why we're here. It was just on and on. I was like, oh my God, I was like an overload. I was like, he's just bursting with questions. Like he can't stop asking, can't stop making inquiries. It's actually, if you read it, it's just like, if you think about it, he is like really, really like absorbed. And I was just thinking how, like, if in our own experience, if we appreciate something, what do we naturally do? Like if we go to a museum and we see a painting, for instance, and we see the painting, we're like, oh, how did the artist make that? When was it made? You know, what was the artist like? When was he born? You know, like you ask all these questions. So as a symptom, asking these questions is a symptom of appreciation. Like he appreciates so much, you know, the world and the creation and the Lord and his relationship with the Lord and whatever's happened to him in his life, the circumstances he found himself in. He wants to know, he's greedy to understand everything. And it's not just he wants to collect information. He's greedy in the mood of appreciation. Does that make sense? So the story of Brahma, there's actually many lessons that we can learn from the story. We know there's three forms of Vishnu, or for those who don't know, there are Mahavishnu. So Mahavishnu is lying in the causal ocean, which is the material energy, and he is exhaling, and he's also perspiring. And through his exhalation and perspiration, the unlimited universes are emanating from the pores of the skin and through his mouth. And of course, there's unlimited number of universes. Within each and every universe, there's the Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, who's lying in the Garbhodak ocean, the bottom of the universe. And he is resting on Anantasesh. And then there's also the Ksharakshaya Vishnu, which is in the universe, in one particular planet, Svetadvip. I'm sorry, yes, Vishnu is Ksharakshaya Vishnu. He's in Svetadvip, an island in the ocean of milk. But out of the three, only one of them gives birth to Brahma. Mahavishnu doesn't give birth to Brahma. So Lakshaya Vishnu doesn't give birth to Brahma. Garba Lakshaya Vishnu gives birth to Brahma. And Lord Vishnu gives birth to Brahma in a very similar way to how all of us took birth. So we have the Garba Lakshaya Vishnu lotus stem from his navel is extended, and the lotus flower is expanded, and Lord Brahma appears on the lotus flower, the same way that we connected to the mother, the umbilical cord, the same way. So when Lord Brahma, he is awakened in consciousness, he is absolutely confused, bewildered, disoriented, doesn't know up and down, left and right, north, south, doesn't know who he is. You know, just like when a baby is born, the baby doesn't even know of its own existence. If you think about it, right? The baby is just aware. Like it's just intaking information. There's no concept of self. The baby. Have you seen that? The baby does not have any concept of self. Doesn't have any concept of other people either. It's just awareness. In the same way, Lord Brahma is in that state. And the first thing he does is he looks for the origin, where he came from. You just all of a sudden land on Mars, and you didn't have any previous consciousness. The first thing you're like, where am I? How did I get here, right? So in the same way, he was, where am I? You know, how did I get here? Who am I? All these questions are coming to mind for him. And so I think as explained, he like climbs down the lotus stem. And, you know, obviously the navel is connected to, just like actually, this is one lesson that can be learned. If you get too close to a situation, you can't see it properly. So he climbs down and he sees the navel, or doesn't see the navel. He doesn't even know where the navel, the stem of the lotus is coming from. And what to speak of the navel, he doesn't even know that Vishnu is lying there, right there. You can't even see that, or experience it, or realize it, or be aware of it. In the same way, so one lesson that we can learn is that in order to understand a situation, you have to have a bird's eye view. And that's actually an important lesson. If we get into a conflict, for instance, in order to actually have an understanding of why there's a conflict, you have to take a break. You have to say, if there's some type of break in the harmony between two devotees, best just take a break. Otherwise, it escalates, right? Take a break. Separate yourself. Have a bird's eye view. What are the different things that led up to that? And how did it start? What was my motivation? Did I have an agenda? Was I trying to get something out of the situation, right? Self-reflect, take inventory. And in order to do that, you have to have a bird's eye view. You have to separate yourself. To take, what is the 500-foot view, right? So he wasn't able to understand where he came from, who he is, and where it is. So he meditated. But this is also what we're just talking about. Meditated. He took self-inventory. That's what meditation is. Just like when you have an argument or conflict, you have a bird's eye view, you separate yourself. The same way, Lord Brahma meditated. And through that meditation, he heard tapa, which is the words of Krishna, penance. So he underwent penance. And fast forward, he actually heard. Actually, this is explained in the Brahma Samhita, and this is actually very, very significant, connects the Bhagavatam to the Brahma Samhita. Does everyone know Brahma Samhita? Nobody knows? Does anyone know? Some of you know. So Brahma Samhita is actually the prayers that Lord Brahma spoke. And that happened actually after this pastime. So the story goes, he meditates, he hears tapa, he meditates, and then he hears Om. Then he hears Gayatri, which is not different than Om. Then he hears Kama Gayatri, which then Kama Gayatri, right, in the same way we have these 4 seed verses, expanded into the entire Bhagavatam. So according to Brahma Samhita, the whole Bhagavatam came from Kama Gayatri, which is a mantra. This is just a one line. Those who are second initiated, it's just one line, very short, just like these 4 verses. And in the Bhagavatam, the entire Bhagavatam came from these 4 verses. And then he had the full realization. He received this mantra. He had the full realization of the spiritual world, of where he is in the material world, of his particular condition, of being not purified, fully purified, having elevated from goodness to pureness. And in some cases, Brahma is liberated already, or is not different from Krishna. Krishna himself takes it from Brahma. And he realizes his relationship with Krishna and his duty towards Krishna, which is to serve. Das, eternal servant of Krishna. So he had all those realizations. And then here in the Bhagavatam, it's explained that Brahma is explaining to Narada how he received knowledge from Krishna. And he developed this relationship with Krishna. Krishna shook hands. It was very endearing to hear that. The first time I read the Bhagavatam, it was very sweet to hear how Krishna shook hands with Brahma. That very intimate, deep relationship that Krishna had with Brahma. But then actually in this verse, we actually in the series, the first we heard Brahma, he was saying, I am fearful that I may become proud, right? Because Krishna gave me some favor. So now we have 2 different types of fear. This kind of fear is very healthy. We have other kinds of fear, like, I'm afraid of losing my reputation, or I'm afraid of taking a risk, or I'm afraid of doing the right thing. This type of fear is not healthy. And we have to, actually, someone mentioned to me a very good way to conquer fear. So fear is an energy, right? When you, let's just imagine yourself at the top of a skyscraper and just imagining, what if I jump off, right? As soon as you imagine that, this fear, intense fear grips you, right? So, and this is actually how these daredevils do what they do. Is they take that energy, that fear energy that grips you, and it actually impels them to do something. It impels them to act. And instead of using that fear to kind of depress you, they use that fear in a positive way. They actually use that fear to impel them to act. So if you're afraid of something, jump into it, dive into it, right? And then that's how, and obviously you have to use your intelligence, which most people on the Guinness Book of World Records, they do. There is some level of, gauging risk and whatever. But, so we do have to conquer that fear, but this fear is different. This fear is actually coming from a place of appreciation and gratitude. Because Lord Brahma so much appreciated and was so grateful for the mercy he has received that he knows He knows that if pride enters his heart, right, he'll lose this very precious jewel, this very precious treasure that he received, which is the mercy of the Lord and his association, right? Because that pride is going to block him. There's a story that I was remembering from the CC, the Boston David the leper. Remember that story? And do you remember what? I think it was that story where he was for those of you who don't know the story, he was a very great devotee, and he was so great that he felt like he had no more proprietorship of his body than the worms who lived in his body. So if a worm fell out of his body, he felt so bad that this worm had lost his home. Like he would pick up the worm and put him back in his body, saying, "This worm, this body is a home for this worm as much as I am." Right? But then Lord Chaitanya, he performed this miracle, right, of curing him of his leprosy, and all these worms went away, and he had this beautiful, wholesome body, and he was glowing, etc. But what the amazing thing was in this story is that what was Vasudeva Leper's reaction to it? What was his emotional reaction to this experience? He was worried. If that happened to any one of us, we would be like, "Oh my God," we would be in ecstasy. We would be in ecstasy to have this body that was healthy. He was on the verge of his deathbed. I mean, how would you survive like that? He was not in ecstasy. He was actually contemplative. He was a bit sad. He was worried. He was more happy in his miserable state. So it's explained. He actually explains it himself because he told Lord Chaitanya, it's like, now that you've cured me, I'm afraid I might become proud. Proud of my body, proud of my beauty, proud of the mercy I have received from you. Like, how many people can say that like Jesus performed miracles, right? But not hardly many people received Jesus' miracles, right? Most people didn't. But those who did receive his, in the same way, Lord Chaitanya. Very few people got that kind of mercy that Vasudeva did. So he said, now I'm going to be famous as the person who's like got this special mercy of Lord Chaitanya. And that's it. So he said, but he was saying, but not worry. Lord Chaitanya said, don't worry. I'll protect you. You'll never be, overcome by pride. So that's a very important lesson. So, and the reason why I bring this up is because Lord Brahma shook hands with Lord Vishnu. It's a very special thing. Not very many people have that opportunity. And this is his response to that. I'm afraid. Vasudeva's leper, his response is, I'm afraid. This afraid is a symptom of gratitude because they value so much their service and relationship to the Lord. They don't want that pride to be in the middle of their love, to mitigate, to depress, take away that love. So it's already 8:30. We have time for maybe a few minutes or no? Questions, comments, realizations, reflections, feedback on what I said. Does it resonate with how you feel? Please.
I've always been, thank you for the class. I've always been slightly confused on the point that we could have all been Brahma at one point, but our Brahma seems to be a pure devotee, and and he gave him the benediction to create living beings because of his penance. But do not all Brahmas get to that point, or? Okay.
So what is the question exactly? That Lord Brahma, all Brahmas let's get to the point of
Our Lord
Um,
Brahma is a pure devotee. Right?
yeah,
Were we ever Lord Brahma?
right. That was the pure devotee, right? Yeah.
were we?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I have heard similar in that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's in the purports in the nine cantos described that when we first fall from the spiritual world, we take birth as a Lord Brahma. And all Lord Brahmas are not Vaishnavas, sort of Mayavadi, like that. But yeah, that's my understanding.
I doubt this Lord Brahma degenerated because he's a great.
It gets into the whole. It gets into the whole, following. But yeah.
So our Lord Brahma, our Lord Brahma, he spoke the entire Brahma Samhita. Those of you who read it, you can speak that. An ordinary person can't speak that. So that's a very, very special devotee. And he had full realization of Goloka Vrindavan. However, as Prabhu was saying, there may be some Brahmas that are not, don't have the Brahma. And also this cycle, this day of Brahma, or this Brahma that we have, so this particular day, is a very special, period for Krishna, which kind of come. So in the same way, right? It's not every day, or it's not every, cycle, or what is the term? It is not every time that Krishna appears in Lord Chaitanya. Only once in the day of Lord Brahma. Right? So in the same way, it's not that every Brahma is the same. Right? It's not like every pastime happens exactly the same. Every universe time. Like you have some incarnations that do certain things in some universes, but not in other universes. So there is differences.
Also, I think it's in Harisari's diary, the first book. One of the devotees asked Prabhupada, Prabhupada, if every living entity was Lord Brahma, then that means every living entity would have to have their own universe. And Prabhupada said, "You rascal, you don't think Krishna can make this every living?" So,
Prabhu, I'm sorry, I didn't just want to finish.
You actually answered. You said the thing that I was going to say. It was perfect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was perfect. And I just wanted to say, you have filled my soul this morning. So thank you very much.
Likewise.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hey Krishna. So I was wondering, I remember you saying something about I don't know what it was related to, but you were saying who am I, or why am I here? What was that related to? If you can briefly go over that.
Yeah, I think I was mentioning how when a baby is born, it has no sense of self-awareness or its relationship. It's kind of like they say, actually, even in modern psychology, it says that babies don't know of their own existence, and they actually see themselves in their mother. And if the mother is sad, the baby is sad. They don't have their own independent power, right? So that's kind of where I was going with it. And it's interesting, actually, Lord Brahma. We think that Lord Brahma is confused, right? And creates a whole universe after he gets enlightened. But the Acharyas actually explain, this is, quite humbling, is that the next day, because every day there's a dissolution, right? Brahma, again, is confused. So it's very humbling, Lord Brahma. Every day he has to recreate the whole universe. And he's just as confused as he was the day before. Right? So the lesson to be learned from that is that this knowledge is not ours. Right? Krishna, he says, I'm the source of remembrance, I'm the source of forgetfulness. So Krishna gave Lord Brahma everything he needed to know to create the whole universe. And the next day, Krishna took it all away. right? And he had to meditate. He had to be like, where am I? Who am I? And then tapa, it all happens all over again. And then he creates the whole universe. So it's very humbling. We actually don't know anything. Everything we have is the mercy of the Lord. Everything. And actually, Jiva Goswami, he explains this very nicely in Sandarbha, that the living entity is only responsible for one thing, or it can be credited, I should say, can be credited for one thing only, and that is turning our head to the Lord. We cannot take credit for any knowledge. We can't credit for any of the opulences. We can't take credit for the love that we even have. We can't take credit for the symptoms of love. You know, like in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I don't know if any read, but there's many ecstasies in love. Like hundreds of ecstasies, different varieties, different variegatedness of the different ecstasies. We can't take credit for any of that. We can't take credit for the tears coming from our eyes. We can't take credit for rolling on the ground. We can't take credit for the hair standing on end. We can't take credit for anything. Jiva Goswami says this, not me. He said the only thing we can take credit for, he calls it samukya. Samukya means we can either turn our head towards the Lord or we can turn our head. That's it. So that's the point of what I was saying. I think I was saying is that we are eternally dependent on the Lord. Eternally dependent on the Lord. It's never that we ever get to a point where, I can make it on my own. No, eternally dependent. And we are, and if it wasn't for the Lord's mercy, we would be eternally confused, eternally bewildered, eternally ignorant, eternally clueless, if it wasn't for the mercy. I think that was the point I was trying to make.
I was just like confused about like how babies can like realize those questions at like a young age, but that makes sense. But yeah, thank you.
So did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah? Thank you, Nataraj Bhagavatam. Shruti Sagarpur was laughing at me. Thank you so much for this. I hope